everyone, Richard Carlton. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training, and welcome to Monday. So real quick on the conversation for today, if I hit the upcoming broadcast, who we are and why should you care? This is fmtraining.tv. Welcome, everyone. Eventually, this will say learningclaris.tv, I think is the new name maybe someday that we switch to. At any rate, today's broadcast will be day 3 of the API. Then we have a couple more days of Nick, and then we got Hansa on Thursday, and then the Claris platform thing on Friday. So that will be back in action. So real quick, so today is the day three of 3 days of multilingual files. We have the sample for you today. When this pops up, this is the About page. If you want to press the button here, you can get back the About page. We are setting these buttons up so they will play the videos. Like for today is day 3, so we haven't even shot day 3, but we've already made a button for you. So at some point in the future, when the sample file, at some point in the future, these buttons will work. So they're already programmed to go to a location. We're going to load the video kind of on the backside into that. So last week we had how to build a multilingual file, how to do multilingual value lists, which apparently is kind of tricky. Today is kind of this conversation about DeepL and the API and getting that information, courtesy of Nick. So this is the branding page on this. This is the sample file here. He's going to walk you through and talk about that a little bit. So this is the version 4 file, Nick. Margaret, can you send Nick the version 4 file real quick so he has this version?
Yes, I can.
Send it to him real quick. So that's the upcoming broadcast, what we have going right there. Very exciting. So Nick, are you there, Nick? Are you paying attention?
Yes. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. And today we're going to do the third day of this series of multilingual file. And as you can see, you'll get a very nice demo file today, because I worked all weekend over it, and so I wanted to give something great, right? So I completely revamped this layout here, right? And I fixed this also to work very well. So today we are going to explore 2 things. So I might spill a little bit over the 4 o'clock, over the 1 o'clock, 1 hour webinar, because I want to cover many things here. So the first thing we are going to cover is how to get a file translated in no time. Okay, when I say no time, is like this. So here I have the English version, which is, for me, in this file, the English is the default. Okay, you can change that. That means the system will take the English as a base to get all the other language. Okay, we need a default, right? So the English is a default. So let's go there and create the Greek version, for example. And I'm taking this example to be more spectacular, okay, because you will see. So now I want the Greek one. So what do you want to do? You want to translate manually, or just press a button, right, and get your translation like this, right? So you get the file translated, right? So we can do the same for the project layout, right? For the project layout, you can go there and translate it. Of course, we can do many language, right? So we can continue, go back to contact, and I say I want the Spanish version. So this is what I get, right? And I want also the French version. So I'm going to put the 5 languages that I'm talking to make sure that I can tell you the translation it's a perfection, because I'm not using this piece of bleep of Google Translate. Like I said, I'm talking 5 languages, and I can tell you right now that Google Translate is the worst ever translation software in the universe. The worst. It's impossible to understand what's get out. You can use that for 1 word, 2 words, but if you have to put something like a sentence, it's impossible. Google Translate is doing something like You don't on the other language, you don't know what it is, you know. So let's go take the Italian version. Okay. So you can see here I got the French, the Spanish, the English, the Greek in no time. Okay. Of course, I can go there and do the same for the value list. So here I have one value list, I have two value lists, I have status and department. So let's say I'm doing the same thing. I want the Greek version, and I want the Spanish version, and the French. So all the language you have on this menu here is the available language to you. Okay. So I have the French and I want the Italian. Okay. I'm going to do the same for this. Of course, you can build a script that run through all the value lists. But for the demo, I wanted to make sure that you can dissect and cut in pieces the code, right? I didn't want something too integrated to make sure that you can take out the piece of code you need and modify it to your needs. So now I have departments in Greek, Spanish, French, and Italian, status in English, Greek, Spanish, French, and Italian. I have the system. I have all the generic buttons and the labels and the titles and the buttons and the dialogues and the tooltip and everything in English, Greek, French, and Italian. So now, when I go there, right, this is the English version, right? So when I click here, I want the Greek version, right? When I click here, I want the Spanish version. And when I click here, I want French, it's in French, and I want the Italian. So that's the first thing we are going to explore today, how this works, okay? But also, and that was the original question from Michel Gravel, okay? Michel Gravel asked me that he has a problem, a big problem we have with the value list, right? Because here you can see it says supporto tecnológico, okay? This is in Spanish, in Italian. So soporte tecnológico, okay? So en español is asistencia técnica. In French, is support technique. But when I click here and I said I want this one, okay, which is asset management. If I change language and I go back to English, he said asset management, right? Same for the status. I said paid. If I change this to Espanol, pagado, and if I change this to Greek, I don't know. It's a long time that I didn't read them. It's a long time I didn't read Greek. But anyway, let's take something French, for example. So see payer, département juridique. Okay. So you see, we changed the value list on the fly, and the data are consistent. So that means if I said this one, this is R&D, right? If I change to English, right, is R&D. And it works. Okay. So we're going to explore those two things. First is how we get the language translated. Okay. So I'm using a website, right? So here you have the website here. I'm using DeepL, okay? So why that? Because that's the best translation in the world, because they have artificial intelligence, okay? So you can pretty much copy a text like this, for example, right? And go there. It will detect automatically and I want to get, where the English, okay? So this is what you get. You get a translation that very, very cool translation, right? So and so you have all the language right here. You have all the language you want. It does a detection, automatic detection. It does that, but in that case here, I suggest not using the auto detection because we don't have enough material. When you have a sentence, their system has enough material here to detect a language. But when you have one word, it's not enough for the auto detection to do a auto detection great. So sometimes you have the risk of not getting the translation. So I'm forcing to get the defaults as in English. Of course, you can change it. You can put the default French if you are in Canada, for example. But for here, the default is English. So how this works? Okay. So let's get this. So here, it's very simple, by the way. I have a list of many. I have many. What's the name? Multi-value list. A multi-value field here. Okay, those are multi-value fields, and inside I put all the text here. So I can get, for example, this. So I can get the generic, right? Let's get the generics. So if you say this, the generic strings, it takes you it gives you the first one. But if you do this, you list and you do this, it gives you all the content of all the multi-value fields in that multi-value field. Okay. So if I change this and I said I want dialogues, for example, see, this is what I get. Where's the dialogue? Okay. So this is what I get. Right? So let's go back to the generics. Okay. So I'm getting this. I'm going there. So he says French detect, but it's not because he doesn't have enough. So we are going to force him to say, no, this is English. Sorry, my stuff is in French. And I want Spanish, for example, right? Or I want French, right? So I am sending this to the system, and the system and the DeepL returns to me a nice, yeah, and you have what I love in this, you have the explanation. I'm showing you, you have the explanation, and you have, see, here, you can see this, you can play the sound, and here you have different options here, you have different variants of the same, right, in the language, right? So this is a really good website. So you send the list of your field there, and then the system will return this, right? And then you populate the fields back, right, with the data you received, right? Like in Espanol, French. So let's have a look to the scripts. So I want to make sure that the script is enough sliced to make everything discoverable. First, you grab the DeepL key. You need a key. You need to have a plan with them. You can use the free one, but you have limitations. So otherwise, if you use it a lot, it costs you like $6 a month, nothing else. Then I'm forcing the source language. To me, the source language is EN. You have the code here. I put you all the code they have. This is the code, right? So they use code, right? So EN, it's their code for English. Then I want the language that I'm going to translate, and that is dynamic, because this field here is going to give me, the language I want to translate to. So I'm taking automatically, this is my default. So each time you create here, so you have a default, language, right? This is a default language, the default language, right? So the default language is the one I'm going to get. For example, I'm creating a new record here, right? And I want the Hungarian, for example. But I'm taking to send to their system. I'm using, right, the default language, right? So that will be this one. Yeah, that will be this one. I think so. Let me see. Yes. So this will be the default, right? So I'm taking the default, right? The default, let's take generic. I'm taking the default all the time. I have a link on each of those records. I have a link that goes to that record here, the English one, to take out the default values, right? And then get the language, right? So that's what I'm doing. So I'm here. I'm in this, but I have a global field with the ID of the default language, which is English, and then here, because I want to set those fields when I get back, right? I get the translation, and I want to set those fields. So I'm pretty much getting the field names of all the fields I need to set later, right? So I have the name of this field, the name of this field, the name of this field in the list, right? So let's debug it for now, right? So I have the key, the language, the current, what's the name? The source language, the language I want to translate, the field names, all the fields that I'm going to set later, right? And the key. Then I continue, right? And I'm sucking all their value in English, right? So I have all the values in English. This is all the value in English, generic labels. So let's go. And here I have the generic, right? I have the labels, right? So I have all the values. I have all the values here, the dialogues, right? I have all the values and in a variable. So now I'm ready, right? I'm ready to I have all the information I need. I have the list of the fields I'm going to set at the end. I have the language I want to translate. I have the source language from what is the original. I have the key. I have all the list of I have all my strings, and here I'm setting, right, the list of all the globals, the variables here that I need to translate in sequence. I will first start with generics, then I will do the labels, and then the titles, and then the buttons, and then the dialogues. So this is a sequence. The sequence must follow whatever you put here in the field name. So the field names and the list need to be in the same sequence, okay? When I'm done, I'm doing a loop, okay? I'm doing a loop here, right, to get the translation from the website, right? So I'm getting the loop, okay? So here is where I'm getting translation. So I'm translating the source, okay? So the source here is taking out the source from this list here of the target strings. So I'm starting with generics. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing that later. But I'm starting with the generics, right? So let's see the source, how the source looks like. This is the generics, okay? So why I'm not sending carriage returns is because I noticed that with this website, it doesn't really like the carriage returns. So I got problems with the carriage returns. And you want to be sure that if you have a carriage return in your text, you're not going to lose it, because I'm replacing the carriage return that separates the value, but I'm not removing the carriage returns that inside the text. I'm going to show you that. So insert from URL. So I'm going to the website with a CURL kind of call, right? And now I have a translation. What's the name? A translation JSON. This is it's a JSON. Okay. When I have this variable here, I'm setting a global. Okay. So why I'm doing this is because a global field, because it helps a lot to see the results for debugging purposes. Here, this is the local variable. That means the variable will go away when the script stops, right? So in order to keep track of the last translation and see if everything right, I'm dumping everything inside a global, okay? To make sure, then it's a debug technique, right? So it's just for debugging. I could have used this in my script, but I prefer to dump everything and check, and because now you can go and see that field, right? Even though the script is running, so, and then you see what you get, right? So that was the last one. So if I do this, right? So now it gets the new one, right? So now that I have this, right, I am doing a replacement, right? I'm setting a field by name, right? And that I'm doing a loop as well, okay? I'm doing a loop as well. Why? Because I want to set the first value. I want to set the first value of this, the second value, the third value, and I want to do this, right, on each multi-value field here, right? So I continue. So it will do that until this is done, right? So it do that, do that, do that, do that, do that. So I have two loops. I have one loop that gets the language, the first one, and then I have another loop that says, okay, set field, set field, set field, set field, until it's done. When it's done, it goes to the other language, right? It goes to the other string, which be labels, right? And then etc., 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 until it's done. Okay. So do we have any questions so far?
Nothing from YouTube or Twitch. Nick, Greek and Russian use Cyrillic alphabet ?
No, Greek is a Greek alphabet. Russian is Cyrillic.
And then can you use languages from right to left?
Yes.
And is it a repeating field?
Those are repeating fields here.
Okay.
So because I showed that on Thursday, I think, that it's the best way, and I'm going to show that later, but it's the best way to extract this in a layout, right? It's the best way to go and get a value and put it in the layouts, right? That's the very best way. So how it works? So we have here a traditional call. So we have the targets, right? The specify URL, so that the URL it's stored in a field in the system what's the name table, and then we have the curl. Okay, very simple, nothing to worry too much. That you have the key, so this is from a variable. This is to preserve the formatting. This is a text you want to translate. This is a source language, and this is a target language. Very simple. Okay. So those, and this, they are local variable. So it's easy to change, right? This is a standard curl. It's not at all complicated. That by far the simplest API ever used, right? You have nothing to the key. One option here, I want to keep the formatting like a bold, italic, or whatever. The text you want to translate, the source language, and the target language is very, very simple. So the technique here of the loop is to prevent to have multiple way, insert. So you can add as many fields you want, and you can change. If you change this, you change this, and that's it. You can. So here I have the field name. This is what I'm going to use here, right? Right. I'm using here set field by name, and I'm getting the field name based out of counter. Okay. So. And here, this is the trick, okay? But I'm going to come later. So here we have the source. So the source, right? I need to do the replacements of the double carriage returns, right? And the carriage returns. So I need to replace those things, in order to. It's not necessary. But I noticed that it works better if we do like this, right? Because sometimes you have language that are tricky. So that's why I did that way. But here, right, I want to extract that variable, right? But I want to extract a name of a variable, right? I want to calculate the name of the variable. And the name of the variable is there. So what I'm doing here, I'm putting a list of all the variable I want as text. They're just text, right? Text. They're text, right? With quotes. So I have a list, right? So pretty much that gives me this. A list of text. And then in the calculation, I have a counter. And the counter say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it counts how many values I have here. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this will return 7. And that will be when the counter reaches 7, it will stop the loop. Okay? So I'm counting the value that I have here. And then here, I'm getting the counter 1, and this guy here is going to evaluate whatever the value I have, the first value, the value number, based on the counter of that target string. So that means that will get a text as dollar generic, dollar dialog. And because I have an evaluate, that will be evaluated as a variable, right? So this is how it works. You put the name here, the calculated name of your variable, and with the evaluate, you evaluate the name, right? So I can show you this if you want. Let's say I have a variable here, the current language, for example. So let you do this. So let's say you have a text here, current language, right? So this is a text, right? It's a text, but I can say evaluate this, and now evaluate this piece of text. Evaluate $$ current language, and the evaluation of that text gives you, the content of the variable. So, and this is how I'm on the loop. I can extract this one first, then this one, 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 based on the list, right? Based on the count, to avoid what's the name, insert, set field, to avoid having 7 times insert and something like that. You have only once, and you do a loop like this, based on the counter. So you have a very simple piece of software here. You will grab the name based on the value from the value list, from the list of values that I have from the name of the values of the variable. So it does evaluate, it does insert from URL here with whatever the string is this. And then when it's done this, I have another loop to loop through those fields here. And this is the other trick I give you, right? I am in the loop, let's say I'm in the loop number 1. It gets the field name. The first field name is this. This is the field name of the loop number 1, generic. It says, oh, I'm in the number 1. Gets the first variable and the content of this variable. Insert from URL, and then, right, you set another counter, a counter number 2. This counter is for the first loop, and this counter is for the second loop. So you don't want to interfere with that counter. That counter needs to stay for the next loop, so you have another one. This counter here is doing the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here I'm saying, I am in the counter number 1, so that means gets the field name from that list, get the first one, which is in generic. That will be the name of the field. But I want to set this is a multi-value field. So I want to set the first value, the second value, the third, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is why I have another counter. I get the field name from the first of my list. But here is how you say, set the field of the second multi-value field. The third, the fourth, and this is coming out the counter. This will say, I want the first, this will say, I want the first field from this one, the field name. But here it says, I want from that field name, I want from each loop, the first, the second, and each time, so that to set the field name, and each time the value, it comes here from the global. Remember I said I dump everything in the global and take the value from the counter as well. So I want here in this field, I have this. So it says, thanks to the counter, get the field name from the first row. But here, if you say 1, get this and put here. The next loop, get this and put here. The next loop, get this and put here. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, etc. Thanks to that here. And this is how it works. Okay. So it's very advanced because we use a variable, we use evaluation, we use a list of values, and we use embedded, nested loops. Okay. But it's a good way to learn how to do that. The trick here is to make sure that you have an end loop, otherwise you get stuck here and it will never stop. And that's easy because we know how many values I have here. So I'm counting the values in that. And that for this value, for this loop. And this loop here, okay, I'm counting how many values I have in that field, right? So for example, here I have 8 values, right? So this will return, this will return 8. So I know when this counter reach 8, stop it. It exit when the counter equal the value counts. The same here when the counter equal the value counts. So when this counter reach out, boom. The trick here is not don't forget to reset that variable here each time you initiate this loop. Otherwise, you will keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It will never finish. This will reset only if you set this. On each first loop, this need to be resetted to 0. Then here, this one will say, okay, take whatever there in the counter and add it and take the counter plus 1. If this is empty, it will put 1 on the first loop, because empty or 0, they're the same. I could have said 0 here, but the same. Do we have a question so far on this?
Yes. So multi-value fields are better than global variables?
Yes. Anyway, here the global variable won't help because the multi-value was to do this. Okay. Here, this is from the table. It's whatever in the label field, and I want the second value. Here I want the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. If you have global variable, how you do that? You cannot, right? So this is the goal. The goal is to have a relationship. So it's a record base and cannot be a global variable. So this is what the goal. The goal is to get this to be displayed on the layout. It is impossible, right, to do that with relationship, fully with relationship. This cannot be one record in one relation. It's not possible. It needs to be a multi-value list, multi-value field, because then I can show it and display it. See here, for example, I'm going to the button and I'm going to the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. So that the webinar of Thursday, you can go to watch it, because this is where I'm explaining, like exactly in the same in the custom dialog. You know, here I'm going to get the dialog number 2, the second field. Here I'm going to the button, on the first button, and then the second button. So if I go to this, right, I go to button, and I see that the first is validate, the second is cancel. So if I go there, right, I have cancel and validate, right? So if I change this and I said, okay, for example, right? For example, right? Here now it's okay. Okay. So so that's why it's not because, yeah, I could have used I need to do that because I have the multi-value fields for my translation, right? So that was questions?
Nope, I think you're good to keep
No?
going.
Okay. So that was for this one. Okay. So the little trick here was to, I repeat, right? Gather the list of fields, then I know where to go here, because this is coming from here. So I'm putting, you know, like I'm explaining you all the time. You need to get to the value. You need to get to the list of values. Always go as much as possible. Go list of value. This is a list of value. This is a list of value. This is a list of value. And then I have all my arsenal on value. And I repeat myself, but it's important. Look all what we have about values, right? About value. Unique, sort, right, middle, left, the JSON values, get value, get, filter value. We have a lot of things based on values, right? We don't have the same, we have nothing on records, right? Get record, we don't, right? We have values. On values, we have a lot of things, right? Okay, so value counts, a unique value, very useful. You can sort on the fly, values, right, left, So we have a lot of values here, a lot of tools on values that we don't have on records and even less on fields, right? So you need to extract the thing and put that on values, on list of value always, right? Because after that, all of this is possible because I'm doing this before. Otherwise, it's strictly unique. It's impossible to do that without get the value, right? So, so if you don't have any question, I'm going back to the next one.
You got one real fast. SP
Okay.
value count gives you how many repeating fields?
SP.
Value count. Oh, value count gives you how many repeating fields? The SP was a typo.
This give me the give me how many variable I have to take. I'm creating those variables. They are created. They are set. They are set in memory. Then here I have a list of the name of all the variable. I'm listing them in a list of values. Then I can say, just by changing the number of the counter, I know I want this one and this one and this one and this one, because I don't have to give the name. The counter is giving me which one I want to get. Because the counter says, get value. If the counter is 1, I want that name of the variable. If the counter is 2, I want that name of the variable. If the counter is 3, I want that name of the variable. So I don't need to name them in my loop. I don't name any variable. The list here is where I put all the names in order I want them to appear, and the counter here is getting the name of the variable, and thanks to the name, I'm getting the content of the variable. If you don't use this and this, I'm counting I could have said, okay, I could have said, okay, I have 8. Okay, I put 8. I could have said that, right? I couldn't, but in case of tomorrow, I'm adding a new one. So I'm 9 here, and I'm adding a new one here. I'm adding a new one. I'm adding a new one here. Then automatically my value count will work. I don't need to care about this, right? So pretty much in that script, everything here above that line is what you change, right? Below this, you have nothing to change, nothing. You understand? So that this is a style of coding. This is a coding style. It's an object-oriented style coding. I talked to a friend of mine recently, and he said, "Hey, dude, you're coding like Objective C is, it's a object-oriented kind of a coding strategy. You have the code, right? This is the code. This is not the code. This is the gather of information. It's not a code. Set variable, set variable, set variable. What code is this? It's not a code. This is the code. If this and let this and do this and loop and insert and close and halt, and this is the code. But this is not. So what I'm doing here, I'm gathering all the information. Get, right? First, set variable. So when I have all my data or all my information, then the code is using it. But you can change this as much as you want, right? And the code below will work. Just because you don't have to modify the code at all, and because the source will take this variable, this will take this variable, and the source is here, and everything I'm using here, like even in the code, in the curl code. This is the key. The key is there. The source is there. The language is there, right? The source language. Where's the source language? Source language is there. The language is there. So I have all the code is going to rely on this. So just what you need to change in the code like this is the data. And then boom, everything reflows. So pretty much you can copy this in your system, copy it, you remap this with your stuff, and that's it. This, you don't even need to understand how that works. All this, you don't need to understand how that works, right? So that's why I code that way. It's a coding style, let's say. Okay. So now let's go and go to the how to get the value list. It's pretty much the same system. Okay. It's pretty much the same system. Okay. So when it's English, I said don't do anything. Okay. Because it's the default. It's the default. So for example, if tomorrow you go there, right, and you add a new department, a new value list, okay, country, for example. You go country, you need to initiate the system, right? Because you need something to translate. I have nothing to translate right now. So when you say I'm adding the English one, the English will be totally ignored because the English is what is the default. So I'm ignoring, and I let you, put your own in your language, right? You know what I mean? So Italy, Greece, France, Italy, Greece, Colombia, I don't know, Spain, right? So the first is English. So now that you have the English one, you say, oh, I want the French one. Okay, so you get the French one out of the English. This is the French one. And you say, oh, I want the Spanish version, right? So it will translate the name of the you want the Italian, right? But the English one is the one you have to enter manually because you need somewhere to start, right? And I define English as default. So this is I'm doing. And I'm doing pretty much the same as the other one. But this one is simpler because I have only one source. I don't have all those sources, okay? I have only one, is this list, right? So I'm taking the default English version of what you just entered, default, okay? So I'm getting this, the default in English, I'm going this list. I'm sending this as a source to my server, to my API. Then the result, I dump the result inside a global like I always do, okay? And then here, I'm taking out for debug purposes, it's just for all of those things is for debug purposes. To have, I repeat myself, but to have a global where you dump everything, then you can see with your eyes. You don't need to have that data viewer. You can just put that. You put this field in your layout, and that's it. You see what's happened. I think it's in 205 here. So you see what's happened. You don't need. You see what happened. This is the last one I did. You know what I mean? So it's the Italian one. So you see, you don't need the global. You don't need the variable, right? Because a local variable is gone when the script is over. Here, I don't. Here, I can still see it even the script is gone. Then I'm taking out again the content of that list, and I'm putting that in the list of values in a variable. Then I'm counting how many values I have. Then I go to that layout value where I'm, pretty much I'm putting the values, right? With the IDs and stuff like that. And then here, this is where the trick is. Okay. This is where the trick is. I want that the value of USA must have the same ID in English, French, Spanish, Italian. These need to have the same ID, right? The same ID. It's mandatory for the system to work, right? For the value list, right? It's important that this has the same ID. So how you do this? How you make sure? So I'm showing what I'm talking about. See here? Same ID, same ID, same ID, same ID, same ID, same ID, same ID. Okay, why? Because it's a quality assurance in English, in Italian, in French, in Spanish, in Greek. That's the same, has the same ID. Same ID, same ID. Okay. So how you do this is very simple. As you take out the list of items, right? So when you take out the source, when you take out the list of this, the list of value, the source, you take the source as a list of value, right? So you take this, you take this, T. Okay, first of all, I need to put myself in the right. So I'm here. You take out the T1 of this one. You take out this, right? The list of this. You take out. This is what you're going to send. This is what you're going to send to the translation. In the same time, you gather this. So you have 6 value here as you get 6 value here, because this is the ID of this, right? So this will be the ID for USA, right? And this will be the ID, I don't know what, France or whatever. You get it. And each time that I'm setting in a loop, I'm setting the records. I'm creating a new record, new record, new record, and then I'm setting with the value based on the counter. Okay, you got that. When you I have 2 values here. I have 2 lists of values. I have the list for each one from that list of values here. This is USA, France, Greece, okay, translated. But here, I have also the equivalence of the IDs of the ID that is from the original. So if the USA is one number, France is another one, another ID, another ID, another ID, another ID. But each time I'm going to create a list out of this, right? Each time you're going to list out of this, this will get the same ID of this one. This, the same ID of this one. So USA or Estados Unidos or US, this will always be the same ID, because as I'm creating the thing, I'm taking the ID from the list that goes, with the same. So that's why I have the same ID. So it's important to do that, and I'm doing that for all of those things. Accounting, we have the same ID as this one, 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 and that's the only way, right? It's the only way to get the thing that I'm going to show you right now. So if we don't have any questions,
one real quick. Spanish could be the default? Question mark.
Of course, you start with Spanish, and you change here. You put SP, and that's it, or ES. That would be the. But you need to change the system completely as a default, because at the beginning, I did the thing right. I worked 2 days on this file, right? Here at the beginning, I'm setting the default language, and I have a language table, by the way. I have a language table, right? I can present this like this. So I have a language table, and for each language, I have an ID, right? So I'm setting at the beginning, that the default to me is the English. I need to set globals to set the default language on each table I need it, right? So at the beginning, I have a script that says, okay, the ID of English, because this, you're not going to change that table every morning, right? This is your table, this is your language table, and until they vote for some crazy guy, English will stay England, right? And French will stay France. As of today, French is France. So this is not going to change, right? So that's why we can rely on IDs. And I don't want to rely on names, because names can change, because you can say, oh, I want United Kingdom, Okay, so you can do it. That's not a problem, right? You know what I mean, right? So you can change the name of the language, but it's not going to break anything because the ID is still the same. So here is where I'm setting the default language, right? This is very important. This is where I'm defining the default language code, EN, EL, FR, IT. But this is where I'm defining the default relationship, right? This is for the translation software. This is for me, it's for the file makers. Okay. So you change and you say, oh, you want Spanish? No problem. You take this and you paste this and you change. And that will, your default will become Spanish, right? So let's go further. So now what I want to show you is something like this. So we have languages, and we have a value list. Okay, let's destroy this one. A multiple value list here. But here's the problem. Here's the challenge. It is a challenge, and tell you. Look this. I am in English. Inactive, active, pending, received, and this is English customer relation. But if I change this, and I want French, for example, everything changed. And the data showing changed. And this changed. And if I change this, and I put this back in English, for example, it changed. So how can we do that? Okay, so, and I'm not modifying the data. So I define that the language of my solution is English. So when I change, let's say I'm putting myself in French or in Espanol. When I change this and I want this will become finance. This is my default, right? This, it's advertising, and this is paid. So as I change in Spanish, whatever, English, or French or Italian, the defaults, the real field is there. This is the real field, because we need something real, we need a default, right? And in my case, the default is English. It can be French, can be whatever, but in my case, it's English. So I have two things here going on. Oh, by the way, remember I told you it was important that every single of those get the same ID in French, English, Italian, Greek, Spanish. It needs to be the same ID. This has to be the same ID in all language. Same ID. Why? This is why. Here I have a global. I have a global field. It's a global field, right? And this global field, I'm going to populate it with whatever I am language, current language, right? In this field, in this layout, I'm using two variables, right? So this is the current language. This is the value list in layout IDs is, right? And this here are the ID so this is how the system works. At the beginning, I'm defining, and that by the way, this is why you have this copy. Why? Because you go to the starter scripts, right? And you need to define, right? What's the name? The list, right? Of their. By the way, this is, I have a bug here. I have a nasty bug here. The boss will kill me. I will tell him to change this. No. Yeah. I have a bug. This needs to be there, and this. Here. It's okay. I'm going to tell you. So because I'm going to use that. So I'm setting here in the global, I need to set those. I show you that on Friday, right? That at the beginning, in order to get a value list, right? In order to get the department and the status value list, you need to use a relationship to extract the department and the status. So you copy those IDs, and then you have a global field, and then you have a relationship, and then you can get your values. So those are the two IDs for the status and the departments. The IDs of those, those and those. So then you set the default language, right? So this can be done anytime. And here, I need to tell in contacts, I have two value lists. I have two value lists in contacts. This one and this one. I need to put here the two ID of that value list, of those value lists that are already set up in my globals. So just I'm saying, okay, take whatever in those globals and put that in the list inside the contacts, right? And then, so I have the language, right? I have the value list, right? And now look what happened. When I change this, it changed this. When I change this, it changed this. When I change this, it changed this. If I change this, it changed this. So as I select something from those globals, when I select something from those globals, it goes there, change the IDs, and then, thanks to the IDs, the combination of the ID of the item, the ID of whatever list I'm in, and the ID of the current language, I can go to that table. I hate this. The guy who did that, oof. It's big, it's giant, it's ugly, it's everything. Okay. Okay. So here, this is my language. This is my language. The ID of the language is here. This is all the Spanish language. All the value lists combined, the status and everything. Okay, we're okay with this. BA. Then I have one of those two, I know, for example, I have two. The 4A works for this, and the 9B works for this. I can combine them too because they are just as a reference, okay? But now, let's say I know that this one is this one here. So let's do the same. So I'm doing this, I've modified last time. So I found for this, right? And let's say I want to find for this. Okay? I want to find for the department, this department, the asset management. Boom. It's this one. But if I change language, everything's the same, just that change. Everything's the same. That changed, the current language changed. So I modify my find and I change the language. And now, boom, it's French. I didn't change this. I just changed the language. So That's why when I go on the fly, boom, I change the language, and then the relationship automatically will get the language of that ID and that ID. That's why it was important to get the same ID. Otherwise, the system doesn't work. By default, because I have a default, I needed a default. The default language is there. Okay? So the combination of this, and this, and this get me this. Always will get me the English stuff. Always. Because this, I'm using the combination of this IDs, this ID, this ID, and this ID to get the defaults. And this, that is the one that changed the current ID. So the combination of this, or this, then it changed that. To get, so what is important to know is this, when you get next, see here, he said, if I go to the first, he said pending human resource, pending public translation, inactive accounting. But if I go there and I say español, he said pendiente recursos humanos, pendiente relaciones públicas, inactivo. See, it changed based on the language, right? Because the combination of this, right? So this is how it works. So now if we want to see the relationship, so this is what you need pretty much, okay? So value list item, value list item. But it's not that complicated. First, you need a relationship that goes to the value list, right? With the value you put in the department display. This and this and this, it's a relationship I'm using on this, I'm using to get the ID. Those two IDs here, right? This is, I put the name, it check on the name, and then I get the ID. See, for example, here, I'm using that relationship. From contacts, I have a nasty, it's okay. From contacts to value list item based on the value, and that is for the department value list. And this is from the same, based on the value, and then when I get this, thanks to that relationship, I get the ID. When I get the ID, then I have another relationship here, right? That gets me the current value with the current, with the current language, current language, the ID of the value list with the ID. So all of those are IDs now. This here is just used to change that value here. This is just doing this. Boom, path, changed. Change. It's just this, to get this. When I get this, right, now I can get whatever value on this, right? So I know there's a lot of things. I should have done a fourth day on this, but do you have any question?
And then David Angel says you could use a value list from a single field.
A value list for single fields. So all of this, it's the most advanced stuff you can do with FileMaker, pretty much. Okay, you need to work on the. You need to have a deep understanding on the relationship to understand that, right? So I agree with this, right? It's but if when something is a little bit complex, we never talk about, it's important, so nobody will learn anything, right? So we will have the video, you can, train yourself, you see how you will have the file, you will see how I've done it. It's everything, so you understand how it works. Everything based on relationship and value list, a list of values. So without this, there's no other way to do that. It's you need relationships, but it's not that complicated, by the way. It's just you have one relationship based on the name, then that helps you gather the ID. Then you have another relationship based on the ID. I prefer to do that because if you change, okay, look, if you base everything on names, if you do this, everything will get broken. If you do this and you said accounting department, okay, let's say you base everything on the name. What will happen? Adios, because everything based on the name. So when you do this, so let's go back in English. So remember I said accounting department, boom, I still have the ID. Ha! And you know what I mean? I have the ID because the name match and the ID match, everything match, right? So that's why I like to do the IDs, right? And thanks to because and in that case, you cannot rely on names because on which name you want to rely? On which one, right? On the French one, right? On which one? So that's why you use IDs, and all need to have the same IDs for each language, right? And that is the defaults. That value here, what I'm showing here, doesn't really exist. It exists now on my computer, but it doesn't exist. What exists is this and this. This exists. This is on the record. This is on the record, right? This is not on the record. This doesn't exist. You will be able to find on this, right? Because if you do a fine layout, you're going to search on this, right? So if I search on this, I found it, right? Free. So I look for ped, right? But if I change language, it changed. So you cannot rely on this. You need to rely on this. I'm talking about value lists, right? So it's important. So when you do a search, you need to do a search on the ID and not on the. This is another question. This is at least 2 weeks webinar to explain that on search mode. But this is a really, really advanced things because you look for multi-language and you use an API and you need to populate fields and so it's yeah, I understand if you're a little bit lost, but I needed to show it, right? So if we don't have any question, we can land the plane.
We got one last question. What happens in a very slow environment?
Very slow environment, that will be slow a little bit. Not I don't know what slow no. FileMaker doesn't really like slow environment anyway, so it won't be slow per se. The navigation from record to record might be sluggish, might be sluggish because you do a permanent reconciliation with this global and so it might be sluggish. I don't know. It's when you have a slow environment anyway, there's so many things that can get slow. that will be the least in your list. No more?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay, so tomorrow, what's on the program? But on the
Let me share my screen and let me look at that.
it's the
It's real world customer challenges.
yeah, really well, yeah.
So you're
I had
starting
a
that series.
I had a brain frog. I just had a
Brain
one and a
fart?
half
Yeah.
hours. Yeah, one and a half what was the name? Hours of webinars kills you. Especially on something that complex.
Yes, no, yeah, you go for it a lot. Michelle Gravel says it's a little over my head, but it's great. Thank you in all caps.
Yeah. And so I think I answer all your questions, because I know the challenge you got was to get synced those things here. And I know it's a challenge. FileMaker is not really good for that. So we need to come with very, but the idea is like this, that's why everything, to me, everything is an idea. It's I don't care about anything else. Everything, the layout is an idea. Everything is an idea. Everything. The layout, the language, everything needs to be a table. Don't try to get to the minimum possible, because if you have a table, then you can get values, right? You can get relationship, because everything is based on relationship. I have no perform fine and whatever. Everything is based on the relationship. You have the default, you have the relate to the global, and you have by the ID. But it's pretty simple. It's you have two for each one. That's it.
Yes. Thank you very much, Nick. We greatly appreciate it. We look forward to having you back tomorrow.
Yes.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.